Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Animefied. Let's look at an animated movie called Buddha, The Great Departure. Both movies are covered in this video, so watch till the end. The film began with a view of the Himalayas 2,500 years ago. The old man lost consciousness in the snow-covered mountains in a heavy snowstorm from weakness and cold. Wild animals like bears and foxes saw him and brought food. Meanwhile, the hare got the old man some branches to make a fire camp. After that, the hare looked at the fire for a while and suddenly jumped into it, burning alive. The group was shocked by what was happening, and the older man put out the fire, and with great sadness, lifted the dead rabbit over his head. The older man in the monastery is now remembered as a hermit named Asitha, the teacher of subsequent generations of sages who founded this very monastery. The current elder of the monastery, Asitha, he gathered his students and assigned one of his disciples named Narrate with a task. In the morning, the student should go to the south, where he will meet a stranger who needs help in everything. In the next scene, the country's ruler hunts animals, but they are not afraid of him at all and calmly approach. After the hunt, the ruler rushes back to his kingdom to meet his wife. She tells about her dream, in which she saw an elephant with 6 tusks. This is a sign from nature is blessing their unborn son. Later, near the castle walls of the market, a guy named Chapra, an enslaved boy, was carrying out a task for his host, bringing him expensive silk. But while returning, he was robbed by a kid called Thatha, who steals to satisfy his tummy. In the owner's house, Chapra received his punishment in the form of lashes, after which he was given the task of returning the lost things. Otherwise, a host would sell his mother. After that, he would go to the alley in search of valuable items, where he came across the boy who had stolen his goods but got beaten by the gang. Later, he wakes up in the tent, where he sees a child who introduced himself as Thatha. After Chapra explained his situation to them, Thatha decided to help him and steal his mother so they could be reunited. Meanwhile, Chapra's mother was taken to the market to be sold. At this point, a rescue operation began, in which Thatha possessed a tiger and frightened a group of gentlemen, thereby saving Chapra's mother. When Thatha returned to his native body, all the animals gathered around him. This miracle was also seen by the monk named Narrate as he passed by. He immediately understood the purpose of his assignment and decided to follow them further. Meanwhile, the capital of Kapilavastu is being raided by Kingdom of Kosala, who had destroyed the Thatha's village and his family in the process. He decided to take revenge on the enemy general and Chapra volunteered to help him with this. Late in the evening, the partners put the plan into action. Thatha moves into an enemy horse and Chapra was riding it. They advanced toward the enemy's base. Unfortunately, Chapra threw arrows at the general but missed and there was no second chance. Suddenly, the enemy's base was attacked by a swarm of locusts, which alarmed the troops and the general tried to escape. The boys pursued the general and discovered him in the water with crocodiles getting closer to him. Thatha was happy with the sight, but Chapra decided to kill crocodiles and save the general to use him for his purposes and get out of poverty. Thatha was not happy with this, but Chapra convinced him. A messenger runs to Kapilavastu's castle with the message that the enemy army had retreated because of the locust attack and that General Budai was missing. At that moment, the army cheered. The ruler of Kapilavastu is expecting the birth of his heir, and he is confident that heaven is helping them in this difficult time. Meanwhile, Chapra is carrying General to the nearest base. The rescued general summons Chapra and invites him to become his right-hand man. Later, the pregnant Maya is transported to another place, but she suddenly goes into labor, after which at night, she gives birth to a son. At this moment, all the nearby animals started running around and watching. Maya falls ill and they decided to return to the palace. The following day, she says that her son shall be named Siddhartha to her husband, after which, she dies. An old man comes to the baby and talks about this baby's future. When Siddhartha is asleep, pointing up with one hand and down with the other, the old man said that this baby would become a great person in the future. After 10 years, Siddhartha grew up as a compassionate boy, caring for every living soul and interested in philosophical questions about life. Meanwhile, the king introduced his son to Bandaka, who is the general and archer. Meanwhile, Chapra became famous when he was appointed general of the troops. During the lesson, Siddhartha asks the teacher philosophical questions, but was shunned. 2 of the students became bored and decided to escape with Siddhartha. Unfortunately, one child falls into quicksand in the forest, where he dies. Siddhartha tried to save him but was of no avail, and he suffered for a long time. Later, the king decided to groom Siddhartha in military science. The next day, the king asks Bandaka to teach Siddhartha military skills. Bandaka obeys and goes rough on the novice. Siddhartha, who is kind-hearted, felt pain while Bandaka kills all the animals he sees during the hunt. Siddhartha misses the deer so that it can escape from the enemy, but Bandaka advises the boy that people follow brave kings and not naive kings. After 5 years in Kosala dynasty, Chapra participates in fighting competitions in which he defeats his opponents one by one. Before the final battle, Chapra talks to Budai, saying he won't embarrass him. During their conversation, The minister's daughter approaches and gives him a flower with the words that she will pray for his victory. A powerful opponent enters the battle and throws Chapra off the horse. Chapra tries to fight back, but the opponent is powerful. When everyone believes that this is the end, he finds the strength to fight and wins with the help of his accuracy and willpower. After the battle, Malika, the minister's daughter, bandages his wounds. Malika's father praises Bandai's hirer. Meantime, Siddhartha passes the training session, and Bandaka praises him for achieving great success at the age of 15. In the evening, Siddhartha runs away from the palace and comes across a camp of impoverished residents and tries to help them. At this point, bandits appear and he was rescued by a girl named Miguela. She believes that poor people should not be given hope, but Siddhartha says he believes the opposite since they are different. Siddhartha makes the claim that everyone is equal before death. He had not seen the world of poverty as he had only experienced the bright side of life. Miguela shows Siddhartha how the poor and the old lived in the following days. Siddhartha's eyes were filled with tears when he was exposed to reality. Later, Miguela and our boy went for an adventure at the lake. Bandaka sees and reports the king. After returning, he was summoned by his father and was criticized for dating a low-caste girl. Meanwhile, Miguela was arrested and about to be executed, but Siddhartha persuaded his father to set her free. Siddhartha was conditioned to marry the daughter of a king from a neighboring kingdom, but unfortunately, Bandaka makes her blind by shoving hot object in her eyes. Later, Thatha came to the city with Chapra's mother and Naradatha, who were standing at the head of the column of troops. Chapra's mother gets a glimpse of her son and was delighted to see him doing well and put away the idea of meeting him. Chapra motivates his men before the upcoming battle against the Kapilavastu's army. Meanwhile, Siddhartha's father assures him that he will make his son the king after winning the war. Chapra with his troops goes to battle against Kapilavastu. Siddhartha stands and observes as Chapra leads the war with all the soldiers. Bandaka coats the arrows with poison and head toward the battlefield. Meanwhile, Siddhartha runs across a bloodstained field and shouts, "Stop it." He doesn't want to continue the war. Bandaka puts a dead enemy warrior on a horse to confuse Chapra. When that horse passes Chapra, Bandaka shoots a poisonous arrow piercing Chapra's stomach, but Chapra removes it, mistaking it for a normal arrow, and resumed his attack on Siddhartha. But at that moment, he froze, looking at Siddhartha's eyes as if the gods were protecting Siddhartha. It overwhelmed Chapra and lost his chance, after which the poison kicked in and Chapra collapsed. After noticing Chapra on the ground, enemy soldiers retreated, carrying Chapra with them. When the warriors returned to Kozala, Chapra was very sick. The healer claims that Chapra will die soon. His beloved burst into tears of grief. Meanwhile, Thatha visits Chapra in the form of a squirrel and watches his condition. He tells Chapra's mother about her son. Naradatha instructs Thatha about where he can locate the sage. Thatha hurries to deliver a letter to a sage who can help cure Chapra. Thatha travels across the Himalayas using his ability to change animal bodies as he had to hurry before Chapra dies. The sage was unhappy because in order to save one life, Thatha had sacrificed many lives in the process. The sage cursed Naradatha, saying that he would be a wild beast for the rest of his life because he had broken the rule. The sage still gave a prescription for medicine to Naradatha. He gave the recipe to Chapra's mother, and then he ran away like a four-legged mammal. She brings the remedy to the general's house and it cures Chapra. He started to recover. Meanwhile, Budai commands the two warriors to keep their lips sealed with regards to the woman who brought the medicine, and Chapra hears it. His mother has been captured and held in a dungeon. Chapra tries to save her, but because of his wound, he couldn't get hold of the other soldier. The next day, Chapra, his mother and Budai was summoned to the court, where Chapra's mother is sentenced to be executed, and Chapra to be exiled, and Budai with house arrest. Chapra requests that he and his mother be expelled or executed. Both the son and mother are standing on the cliff of a mountain. When they are being executed, Thatha climbs up the rocks and shouts at them to save themselves, but one soldier saw the opportunity and throws his spear, piercing both of them. They lose balance and falls into the abyss without any regret. In the meantime, Siddhartha's child was born and his people visited him. He had good intentions for his people, so Siddhartha decided to find answers to his questions and bid farewell to his kingdom. That evening, he halted near the lake, strips all his jewelry and also cut off his hair, and asks the soldier to hand it over to his family. Meanwhile, a messenger arrives in the city with the bad news that enemy troops are invading again. There will be another battle. The king summons Bandaka with a request to lead the troops, but Bandaka will accept if the king accepts his condition. His condition was that, once the war has ended, Bandaka shall be crowned the king. King had no other choice than make him the king, and he proceeded to war. He crushes the opponent with a single swing of his sword, but a spear was thrown by the enemy, piercing his head. When he hesitates on the battlefield, He passes. Siddhartha comes and closes the eyes of the fallen Bandaka. We see a blind woman, Migela, walking in the mountains, and Thatha, who has lost his relatives, wandering in the desert. Siddhartha abandoned his home and entered a hermitage. The vast eagle grabs a tiger cub while its mother tries to take her cub away. During a small fight, the baby falls out of the eagle's clutches and falls into the stomach of a long snake. Meanwhile, the tigress has already killed the eagle, but she falls exhausted due to numerous wounds. From that moment on, the snake was attacked by a flock of ants and gradually devoured. Over time, only the bones and skeleton of an undigested tiger cub remained, but a rainstorm starts and washes away all the ants. We are told how the life of one being is connected to the life of another. The strong exist at the expense of the weak, and in the end, the hunter becomes the victim himself, and the human world is no exception. The strong side always oppress the weak side. The kingdom of Kosala and the mighty kingdom of Maghat have fought for supremacy over the territory of the range's river basin, and even the tiny villages of the kingdom of Kapilavastu were attacked by Kosala, and those who were affected by the war suffered a lot. Siddhartha's mother, Maya, was reborn after her death in heaven, where 33 deities reside. During Siddhartha's wandering, his mother looks at him and blesses him. She asks him to find what he's been looking for so long. Siddhartha tried to help the poor orphans by covering them with clothes. We are shown how Thatha became very old and started stealing with Migela. Suddenly, he notices a monk named Deepa, who explains the full extent of her suffering. Migela challenges the monk to burn one of his eye with a burning flame, thinking that a man does not have enough spirit. Still, he burned out the eye, thus proving that the more suffering a person experiences in his life, the better his future rebirth in the wheel of samsara will be. Later, Siddhartha meets up with Deepa in a residence hut. The man who invited the monks has several children, one of whom wants to become a disciple of Siddhartha. A novice monk does not accept students, as he is only a novice. They refuse to take him with them, but he still follows them. Siddhartha and Deepa decided to go to the grove to practice, but this child was behind them. He accidentally trips on the solid root of a branch under the water and loses consciousness. The monks decide not to leave him but to take him with them because he might die in a severe condition as they walk towards their destination. They notice a group riding on a horse and they request them to help the boy, and they did not refuse. Thatha and the monks brought the sick boy to their home, where Thatha started talking about how he could have possessed other animals before. Deepa remembered the words of his teacher Naradatha about the boy named Thatha, who possessed mystical powers, but only when he lost her, he started growing drastically. Siddhartha instructed him to heat the knife to treat the boy's wound. When this happened, the boy was caught in pain between the world of life and death. He came back to life as the goddess told him that the boy needed to be close to Siddhartha and help him in everything. When Migela entered the house, she immediately remembered Siddhartha's voice and recognized it. They remembered each other and realized that Siddhartha used to be the king of his kingdom. Thatha asks him to ascend the throne and destroy Kosala as revenge. Siddhartha asks for 10 years for this. If he doesn't find any answers in that time, he'll come back. The boy got up and ran around the village in the morning, screaming that a tornado was coming. However, there wasn't a cloud in the sky, not even a hint of bad weather. Still, the whirlwind started and destroyed the entire village, dragging many people with it. The boy was summoned by the king of Magadha to learn his fate. He declared that the king would be killed by his son when he was 30 years old. The king was angry and ordered the boy to be killed, but the boy was smart and knew that he would not die that day. So he called the guard to him, and a snake fell on top of him, which was supposed to fall on the boy. The boy was about to leave when he suddenly said that he will follow Siddhartha till he dies. The king asked to be escorted to the monk. He offers to make him the ruler and will agree to any deal. But Siddhartha needs to go to the grove for training. He is unwavering. When they come to the bamboo grove, they notice that people undergo hard penances. People keep their posts and clear their minds. They exhaust their bodies in every possible way to purify their souls. More than a year has passed. The boy now counts the days until his death. He is not afraid of it but takes it for granted. The monk leaves in the coffin for many years. Thatha comes to the grove of Siddhartha and offers him some fruit. The locals then want to drive them away. In the meantime, Migela is gradually dying from his illness. She is unable to move yet she has come to meet Siddhartha. Deepa does not support Siddhartha's hikes to people who do not undergo austerities. Siddhartha promised Migela that he would cure her. Suddenly, the boy opening the coffin in which Siddhartha was being cleansed talks about the method of salvation. He offers to save her by removing the pus from her body, so he did. Soon after, the woman became prettier and was able to walk independently, thanks to Migela's rescue. Envy and the desire for revenge in Thatha already vanish, and he refused his previous offer to let Siddhartha become king. Meanwhile, the city is being attacked by Kosala's army. They already invaded, and the army has a mighty and giant warrior who is several times stronger and more significant than an ordinary person. He did not stand out with his mind. Kosala's army crushed the city and took control of it gradually. The day is approaching when the very day of the boy's death will soon come. He already knows the cause of his death and when exactly it will happen. He will die on the next full moon. Siddhartha does not want to lose his close friend being eaten by wild animals, so he wants to protect him in every possible way. Siddhartha tied him to a tree and sat down to meditate at night. The rabbit made its way to Asaji and chewed through the rope. The animal showed the way to the boy, so they went to his death. He tumbled down a hill and emerged among a pack of wolf cubs. They were all starving, and Asaji decided to give up his body to feed the cubs. He lay down on the ground and waited for the adult wolves to come and tear him apart. Meanwhile, Siddhartha comes to his place and notices Asaji's bloodied body. He runs away from there in fear. Due to the pain of the loss, Siddhartha undergoes even more excruciating and grueling training sessions. For 10 days, he didn't even drink a drop of water. His fellow monk does not admire Siddhartha, as death is the best outcome of austerities. Siddhartha continues to meditate on top of the stones. A strong wind begins, and he is blown to the river. He falls into the depths and already sees another world between life and death. His mother, the goddess Maya, says she told him that Asaji was eaten by wolves so that he would know the one truth, and that the torment of austerity is meaningless. Waking up on the beach, he sees a girl in front of him, giving him a porridge cup, which saves him from starvation. Siddhartha leaves the grove accompanied by various animals all the time. He learns the very wise fact that Asaji was eaten by wolves, not to kill him but to feed the cubs, unlike humans, who kill animals for fun. Meanwhile, Siddhartha's father was summoned to the palace, where the Prince of Kosala wants to completely wipe out his family and exterminate all the inhabitants of Shakya. The prince even has his mother in prison because he knows she comes from a slave family. He doesn't mind that she is his mother. On occasion, the biggest soldier in the army comes to the woman and feeds her. He feels very sorry and wonders why his son put his mother in a dungeon. The warrior tells how he lost his parents and was picked up by the prince. Having learned about this, the prince subjected the warrior to a beating with a whip by 3 people. Out of hatred, the warrior broke shackles and ran away, smashing through the door of the city. The subject arrives with the news that they have found where Shakya's Prince Siddhartha is located. A group of warriors led by the prince immediately looked for it and came across Buddha. Siddhartha wasn't upset. He didn't even hate it. On the contrary, he intends to kill his entire lineage. Prince was holding his sword to Siddhartha's throat when the monk looked at him with his gaze. As he swung to chop off Siddhartha's head, his sword was struck by lightning and fell at the feet of Siddhartha. The group hastily retreated. After receiving the news that these slaves are infected by the plague, which was killing the people behind the bars, then the counselor said that they should lock up the dungeon and burn it to the ground. As Giant was outside the palace with his friends, he saw that the dungeon was set on fire, so he rushed to save the prince's mother. He threw himself into the blazing fire and rescued her. He was able to get out by destroying the city's door. He carried her to the lake. The prince went to the giant and ordered him to get rid of her, but the giant did not want to leave her and decided to go far away and live with her. He is no longer a servant. The giant carried her to the cave in the shade. Now he calls her mother as she reminds him of his own mother. In a tragic incident, he reveals that his birth parents were trampled by an elephant. She asked the giant to remove the mask, but at first, he hesitated because everyone was afraid of his face. Still, he took off his mask, and she was not afraid. She said his face was charming and kind. In the evening, the giant has collected a lot of food and carries it to the cave, but his heart skipped a beat seeing his mother dead. The giant was very sad, and he had to dig a grave for her with his hands while fighting off a pack of hyenas that wanted to eat her corpse. The depressed giant wanders the lands and no longer sees the meaning of his existence. He asks the storm and thunder to kill him. The giant sees a strange, yellow glow on the bank of the river. There, Siddhartha was meditating under a tree. The giant came up to him and wondered about his purpose in life. He was enraged at the prince for leaving his mother to die, but Siddhartha knows that prince is heartbroken, and the thought that he had to be so cold to her will haunt him for the rest of his life. Siddhartha gives important advice to the giant, saying that every leaving soul leaves in torment and sorrow. A giant can understand the suffering of others because he has suffered. He was there when the prince's mother and other slaves died in the fire. She was happy that she was not alone and was being taken care of. Siddhartha's mother died on the 7th day after his birth, but she still does not leave him and looks after him. The destinies of every living being are very closely connected. The giant was very grateful for Buddha's advice and offered himself to be his disciple. Siddhartha refuses to accept him because he thinks he is not yet ready. This great monk later came to be known as Gautama Buddha, and now his main task is to teach other people how to live. We are shown how the other slaves were freed from captivity, and how Siddhartha's father survived. Buddha continues to wander and put people on the right path. So, this heart-touching recap comes to an end. If enjoyed, press that like button, and subscribe for more of such content. See you soon. Peace.